Good morning, and welcome to the weekly Dementia blog sponsored by SpectrumEd. We're very excited. I've noticed that we've got quite a few more followers and lots more questions that are coming in. So I wanted to address frontal temporal lobe dementia today. We could probably go on and talk about frontal temporal lobe dementia for at least a week because of the multiple different subtypes. So I do want to talk about that, and this is also in lieu of doing the frontal temporal lobe support group for Vanderbilt that I did a few weeks ago. And also, we had a wonderful presentation via Zoom for the Alzheimer's Association this past Saturday. So I know I'm filtering a lot of questions in from that too. So let's get started. Frontal temporal lobe dementia, although it's considered to be related to Alzheimer's, it is a much different form of dementia that we've discussed in previous blogs. We've discussed Parkinson's-related dementias and Lewy body. We've discussed vascular dementia. So this is a much different animal. It is considered to be fairly rare. I see different statistics in different journals, but we see about 50 to 60,000 new cases every year. But I do think that's a little bit. Those numbers may not be fully accurate because I see frontal temporal lobe dementia a little more frequent than that. It used to be called Pick's disease. It is a very more fast-moving dementia. And this statistic sounds crazy, but it does say, the average lifespan is like from 2 years to 20 years. Well, that's a big gap there. But I would say most mean life expectancy post-diagnosis is 6 to 8 years, kind of in that range. And it does cost quite a bit more because we see an early onset with this. Like I said, it's much more genetically related, much more so than late onset Alzheimer's disease. But we see an age of onset of around 57 years old. So it starts young, so it costs more on an annual basis. We have an annual cost of Alzheimer's disease, usually kind of right in the about $120,000 to $125,000 a year for the cost of frontal temporal versus the cost of Alzheimer's is around $60,000 to $65,000. So let's talk about what is frontal temporal lobe dementia. Well, it is basically what it says. It affects the frontal and temporal areas of the brain. These areas of the brain control multiple different things, including your social ability, your language, your behavior, also other sensory areas like hearing and different things like that. So first, let's talk about, we'll call it FTLD, frontal temporal lobe dementia. So FTLD with a motor neuron loss, such as ALS, this is where we're going to have cognitive loss. We may have some behavioral impairments there, and obviously the motor impairments due to the ALS. If you like more information on ALS, there was a 5-part series on ALS done with CNN that I got to contribute some information to. So if you'd like to have some of that, you can reach out to us. The second subtype under the frontal temporal lobe would be the behavioral variant, and that is exactly what it is. We have patients, in fact, I had a patient with this 2 weeks ago with a behavioral variant frontal temporal lobe dementia where they're socially inappropriate. They may lose their jobs. They may say things that are inappropriate socially. They may be sexually inappropriate. So they kind of lose that social filter, if you will. And then we have one that's also called primary progressive aphasia, or PPA. This has not got a lot of media attention because Alzheimer's gets the majority of it. However, PPA is an extremely difficult type of dementia to assess and diagnose. And sometimes we see PPA patients not even have memory impairments until much later on in the disease. But they'll fail memory tests because they don't understand the language that's coming into their brain or be able to produce language. So they can actually start failing the memory test and actually not have memory problems until later on in the disease process. So there's 3 subtypes here. Semantic variant, primary progressive aphasia, is if I had let's just say these are trees, poor analogies. We have trees. And this tree here is a Christmas tree, and this one is a palm tree. And I would ask the patient, which one would you see on the beach? The patient would be unable to determine which one they would be actually see on the beach. So the word recognition is a problem there. Non-fluent PPA, this is where patients lose the ability to kind of go into the brain and find words that they want to put into a sentence, or they lose the ability to understand speech. and that becomes what we call global aphasia. So that would be like going to a foreign country and not knowing the language, so you don't know what's being spoken or what's being said to you. And logopathic variant is another form of primary progressive aphasia. We see spontaneous, like slowing of the speech output, and also word retrieval issues. The last two that fall under the frontal temporal lobe family would be corticobasal syndrome. This is characterized by memory loss, cognitive loss, but then they also have rigidity. So they get really tight and they have apraxia. Apraxia is the loss of motor movements. So that can be in talking, speaking, walking. They lose the ability to have motor movements. And then lastly, we have progressive supranuclear palsy, and this falls again under the FTLD family of syndromes and dementias, where we have behavioral problems with PSP, we have cognitive loss, they have Parkinsonian type symptoms, so a lot of movement disorder issues, and also a lot of eye movement and visual disturbances as well. So as you see, when we start to diagnose and get into these different types of dementia, it is critical in our treatment moving forward that we know exactly what type of dementia that we're dealing with. And especially with frontal temporal lobe dementia, it is a very, very difficult, probably one of the most difficult dementias to really work with and also accurately diagnose. And it's very difficult on the caregivers as well because they are a much younger age. I heard somebody in the support group refer to the other day, and I thought it was well put, as walkie-talkies. They can look completely normal, but obviously the temporal and frontal areas of the brain have atrophy, and so we do see quite a bit of different symptoms that we would from Alzheimer's disease. Next week, we're going to get into some more symptom management things, filtering in some questions on nutrition and Alzheimer's disease. So we're going to start talking about that next week. So look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you and have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week. Thank you.